This is Robert Marglanch of the MindShare Learning Port, and welcome to MindShareTV podcast with Dr. Margaret Weber, Program Director, and Kristen Lundquist, Mahoksy, Senior Fellow on the launch of the Global Institute new certificate program in global leadership and multi-faith engagement in collaboration with the Center for Global Partnerships and Learning in collaboration with Pepperdine University, along with Afifa Syed, Senior Fellow of Multi-Faith Relations and Global Leadership. Dr. Margaret Weber is a past dean of the Graduate School of Education and Psychology at Pepperdine University, of which I'm a proud graduate. And Kristen is based in DC and is, as I said, the Senior Fellow for the Center of Faith and Leadership at the Institute for Global Leadership. Thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about the program and its goal, Kristen?
Yeah, the program is actually a part of a larger organization called the Institute for Global Engagement, based in DC. And it was founded in 2014 in response to some of the gaps that we were seeing just as a larger staff at some of our global conferences. So we noticed that in holding conferences around topics of religion and rule of law, religious freedom, freedom of belief, that oftentimes women of faith were not really a part of those critical conversations, especially in some of the more religious regions of the world. And so we really recognize that as being an issue that we wanted to help address. And so part of the brainstorming around how we can approach that started to involve our global network. We started to gain feedback from women from all around the world as to what would be most helpful in filling that gap. Consequently, over many meetings, phone calls, coffee outings, so on and so forth, we conceptualized the Center for Women, Faith, and Leadership. And the center is really focused on helping to build and advance the leadership of women of faith very broadly in topics of religious freedom, peace, security. And I say broadly because we define that very broadly when you're talking about what creates things like peace and security for women and their families. So we created within the Center for Women, Faith, and Leadership a fellowship program for women of faith from all around the world, different countries, that focuses really on three key pillars. One is really focused in on identity exploration as a pathway to resilient leadership. We know that when women of faith, or really anyone in general, can answer the question, who am I? That their resiliency skyrockets, their ability to not just survive challenging times, but to actually thrive. And so that becomes a core tenet of our CWFL fellowship program. Second core tenet of that program is really practical skill building. So things like negotiation, public speaking, how to really influence a global stage on those issues. And then thirdly, we know that things like burnout, compassion, fatigue are real issues for women of faith working in a lot of these spaces. Namely religious freedom, peace and security. And so the third pillar really focuses on holistic self-care for sustainable leadership. And then out of the fellowship program really came the certificate program, which I know we're going to talk more about here, through a key partnership with Pepperdine University as well.
Fantastic. And well, thank you for that, Kristen. Margaret, congratulations on the launch of the certificate program. What was the inspiration behind the program?
Thank you, Robert, for having us on for the podcast this afternoon. Kristen really is the inspiration. She's the former program director and had the idea that if we could offer a certificate program for many women around the world, a certificate is very meaningful and makes a difference in their ability to signify the kind of leadership that they need in the organizations of which they lead within their communities, within the government entities that they're involved with. So we approached Pepperdine and their Global Center for Partnerships and Learning and asked them if they'd be interested in partnering with us to offer a certificate. And the response was, we'd be very interested because we don't know of a program that exists anywhere similar to this one.
Fantastic. And how does the program support women reaching their full potential in productivity and creativity?
Well, I'll start with that, but I welcome Kristen and Afifa's response as well. What we find, and Kristen actually responded to this a little bit as well, but what we find is that when women really understand their own identity and have thought carefully about their personal leadership and their values that support them in leading, that they have more confidence and they recognize that they have the ability to lead. I think one of the ways our program is very different than other women's leadership programs, of course, there's the faith component, but also we try to talk about leading in multiple perspectives. And a lot of the programs seem to deal with more kind of theoretical, and we try to take the theoretical along with the practical. So we talk about both together, and we talk about there are multiple ways to lead. So I know, Robert, in your program, you probably talked about authentic leadership. So we really talk about that from a faith perspective and how our faith can support us. Because for many women, their faith, they may have a strong faith, but they've seen their faith as a hindrance in their leadership opportunities, particularly if they come from conservative religious backgrounds where women in leadership really aren't the norm.
Fascinating. How is the Center for Women working towards equipping women with faith to assume and advance in leadership roles and influence decision-making in global affairs? And this would be directed toward Afifa, would it?
Sure, I'll take that heavy duty question. I think it's a combination of how Kristen and Margaret both sort of described the program. And it's unique because we really do start with respecting the women for who they are as leaders. The program is not there to teach them how to be leaders, which I think is different than a lot of other programs, as we were mentioning before. But also it's starting with that respect and authenticity in their capacity that they have. We also talk about invisible leadership, which is also important because some women don't identify as leaders, or they don't want to be the ones that take the mic, but in fact, they are in those positions in one way or the other. So we kind of unpack that as a group, as the fellowship, and the fellows as they're together, and they try to understand what it means to have leadership positions, what it takes to do that, but then also owning the fact that they are already in those positions and they're already serving their communities, they're serving some sort of an advocacy space, but they're also many times in government or other, bureaucratic or other kind of contexts where they want to be able to expand their skill set, but they also want to create space for creativity in how they're approaching their work itself. So it's fascinating when you have, women that are of faith, women of faith themselves doing work in sex trafficking, for example, or they're doing youth advocacy, or they're doing, some sort of development of women's leadership themselves, and for them to sort of think about who they are as an individual, how that individual context refers to or interacts with the work that they're doing. And we do a lot of self-reflection through the program, which I think is also very unique and very important as part of the program. So we have a whole system of, thinking about their own leadership plan. What does it look like? What are the gaps they've recognized? And then how can they meet those gaps through sisterhood in the fellowship, but also how can we be responsive in the program? And that's really been, I think, a hallmark of the program, is that we look at what is needed and we ask the questions of the women. And just like Kristen was saying, the very genesis of the program was a lot of talking about what is needed, but it's a continuous evolving characteristic of the program, which is some women in some cohorts need some different kind of skill building, or they request something else. And we're able to, the nature of the program is organic and it's responsive, so we can see what is a priority for this cohort that perhaps another cohort didn't need. And I think that's what's really helping us to hone in on what is important, but then also understanding that the leadership roles that they already are in can be supported in a way that's useful to them, and not just bringing a cookie cutter program in for them to be a part of. And I'm very excited about those kinds of characteristics of the program. And we know now, talking to alumni, more than 100 women now, what has worked, what hasn't. And therefore it's the certificate program that's now being launched is really sort of consolidating all of that into a really importantly a program that's contextualized for each woman, and then hopefully for the global impact that we have.
Fascinating. Margaret, did you want to add something to that? Okay. Kristen?
Yeah, I very much echo what Afifa was saying, and I think the hallmark that she really mentioned of it's a mutual learning and mutual mentorship environment makes what we do really unique, and brings just a higher level of respect into the engagement with women of faith as they try and advance their leadership.
Well, fascinating, and you so eloquently described it, Afifa. And as a male, I would love to be able to join something similar to this program. We have a lot to learn. I do a podcast series with the two authors of Innovate Hers, and there are 30 global female entrepreneurs that were featured, and I've had the honor to host the podcast because I suggested it. And it was really fascinating to learn from the entrepreneurs and the various lenses of women, successful women leaders from around the world. And, listening skills. We were talking today with one of our startup entrepreneur winners that we, from one of our challenges that we have. And listening skills are so important. And us men could stand to learn so much from you. Ladies, for sure. So what's next? Talk to me about what's next, and how large is the cohort that you kick off with, and is there still space available?
So what's next? I might say that we've already had women from over 34 countries participate.
Wow.
We're going to be adding, I believe, 2 countries with the incoming group. So we offer 2 types of program. One is a hybrid program where part of it is done face-to-face. We have 2 workshops a year for that group, and we meet somewhere around the world. We're going to have our first meeting in Argentina in October.
Wow, wonderful.
For this particular cohort. And then we have just the distance learning cohort that is also, the certificate program will also be distance learning. And in that program, we usually have 20 to 25 fellows that participate in the program. And there's still room for people to apply for the certificate program. We're almost at capacity, not quite in the distance learning component. The Institute for Global Engagement, which is our umbrella organization, which the center is under, that Kristen mentioned. And we have a new president, Bob Roberts, and he's come to us from running a couple other organizations, one called the Multi-Faith Neighborhood Network, where there are 3 kind of co-hosts, an Imad rabbi and him as a Christian pastor. And we just had a strategic planning meeting with him coming aboard as the new president. And what we talked about are ways, and particularly related to women, how we begin to think about all of the programming that we do through the Institute, how we can incorporate some kind of a women's leadership component to it. So out of that, we do programming. We have program directors in Southeast Asia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, and then we have a program director in Eurasia, Georgia, Kyrgyzstan. So you can see kind of the breadth of the work that the organization does. And so we do programming in many different countries around the world, but typically they've been oriented towards men, the rule of law and religious freedom. But if we can think about that a little more out of the box, we can start thinking about how do we maybe at the same time offer a workshop for women and talk about how women of faith can be involved in leadership. So we're really excited about this next part of the journey for the center within the Institute.
Congratulations. Kristen, FIFA, any final thoughts to share?
Well, I just wanted to say quickly that one of the things that we do in the sessions is talk about, we don't say men versus women leadership models at all, but we do talk about, so McKinsey has a survey that they've done about what are the top characteristics or traits that Fortune 500 companies are looking for, right? And so we look at that and then we compare them to what, how women, well, they've done that themselves, actually, McKinsey, and showing that those traits, those 5, 10 top characteristics are actually, what women hold or women characteristically uphold. So the idea that leadership is something that we can, look at in a more creative way and be more responsive to it, and that women can feel that confidence that they have those characteristics to even, for business world, it's not just the nonprofit world, but the business world as well. That's exciting. And I think, some of what Margaret's talking about moving forward, it connects to that as well. So we're happy to be a part of that.
Well said. Thank you so much for that, Afifa. Kristen, final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just so excited for the next phase of the journey for the Center for Women, Faith, and Leadership. I think that the certificate program in collaboration with Pepperdine University is such a key next step. I think it not only expands our resources and offers it to a broader set of women of faith around the world, but it does give them a tool that they can use, an accredited tool to advance their own leadership in their local context. So really, really excited about that. Really excited to partner with Pepperdine University and continue working now as a senior fellow with these 2 wonderful women on the podcast today.
And with that, thank you so much for your time this afternoon, Margaret, Kristen, Afifa. Congratulations on the launch of the certificate program. And my name is Robert Margolacci of the MindShare Learning Report. Be sure to check out www.mindshare.learning to get your latest issue. And until next time, stay healthy, stay safe. Thank you for Learning Curve, Steve.